I am building a installation of scraps. So I'm sorting through this box. I just have I have like lots of scraps that I use to create more finished pieces. I go through the scraps and it's just a collection of paper essentially. A lot of it I've dragged around for a long time. Some of it I end up throwing out, but most of it I just, I collect this paper. I don't kind of go out of my way too much to collect paper because I usually end up with a lot of it. But when I first started making these more finished collage pieces, I started just using these sort of offhanded scraps that I had. I had like kind of a collection of sort of doodled on paper and stuff, and I started using those to create sort of compositions, and then I would really work those and paint on them. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating sort of like a site-specific temporary one. So it's not really how a finished one would look, but it's much bigger. So it's kind of interesting because I'm using some things that I wouldn't necessarily use in a finished one because it's temporary. So there are some things in here that have been hanging around that I might be nervous about putting into a finished thing. Like for example, like a photograph. That's like a photograph of a piece that's in the show. It's just like a kind of like a snapshot photograph. It's not a great photograph, but it's just, I thought it was funny to put that in because the piece is on the other wall. It's a cucumber. So like that's not something I would put in a finished piece because it would just be maybe too glossy or something, because I kind of like them to have a certain texture or something. But some of these pieces later might end up, when this is all taken down, might end up in a more finished one. I mean, in this, for example, this was actually exhibited as a final piece. This small one here, but I sort of had loose plans. I wasn't so happy with it as a finished thing necessarily, so I just threw it back in the scrap box and thought, well, I'll just, maybe work this into a bigger piece. So things kind of get recycled and reused, and like this is, I was working on this large drawing, or sort of a collage drawing, and I didn't like how it was going, so I cut it up. So this ended up in the scrap box, but then other pieces ended up in other pieces that I finished. I'm trying to think. I don't think it's in, oh, actually, I think some of the fragments from that ended up in some other things in this show. And this is like a oven mitt that was part of something that didn't really work out. And it all sounds so negative, but it's not. It's more like I take this stuff and rework it. Like a lot of it will eventually get reworked into something else, and then it'll give it more of maybe like a finished quality to it. So these two and are examples of like one that's more finished. I found this. This is like a piece of old sheet music I bought in Sackville at Julia's antique barn, and that sort of made its way into several things. There's just like the paper and the color, and I don't know if you can see it's in there, but I've painted on it. And again, these are sort of scraps pieced together and painted on. Like this would have been a very loose doodle it was on an envelope. So it's a very loose doodle that I painted on and worked a lot on and made into sort of more of a finished thing. And it was on the envelope for this place that I show at the Adam Baumgold Gallery. It's not really an ad because I obscured it, so now it says "Damn B.U. Gold Gall." And then that's actually an envelope from Museum London, from London, Ontario. So it's just, so I'll have these envelopes around, or just regular stuff people have around paper, and I'll draw on them. Now it feels a little more self-conscious because I know that I'm sometimes going to end up with these in as scraps to use later. So it's a little more self-conscious. This is just another example of the finished stuff. I was living in Toronto and briefly, and me and my friend Seth found this framer who would throw out mat boards. So they were throwing out this really nice mat board, and we would just collect that. So this piece and this piece are actually this sort of discarded mat board. If you saw it closely, you could see it's like torn. And then I would draw on these with ink, so they'd be just an ink drawing, and then I would start to compose. Then I would just have them lying around, and then I would begin composing a piece, and okay, I'll put that there, and another scrap there. Like they start off sort of like that wall piece looks, like very kind of rough like that, and then they get worked on more and more. Like then I watercolored it and added more drawing to it and smaller pieces of paper, so it just kind of slowly gets built up, and then it looks more finished. Like this, the wall piece I'm working on won't get to that state. It'll just be more of like a raw state, sort of so you can see maybe how it starts. I mean, it's much larger, so I'm composing it differently, but it's very similar to the way one would start out. And I mean, while I'm creating it, I know I'm not going to be painting on it, so it's a little different. And to me, it looks a little drab because it's all these kind of rough pieces of paper, whereas this is more like I would paint on it with acrylic paint and make it more colorful. So the end result's a little different, but it's similar, and it's sort of interesting to me to dig out all these scraps because it might give me some ideas about what I'm going to do later with the scraps once they come down. Yeah, so these are two examples of maybe earlier stuff from around 2000. I say earlier just because maybe when I started doing this kind of work, where I would work on a lot at once, like maybe I don't know, upwards of 8 or something. But more recently, I guess, because I'm working a little bigger. To me, bigger is like 15 by 20, or sometimes a little bigger. Then I'm working on less. But I did this show called The Stacks, and I kind of called it The Stacks because I was just working on stacks and stacks of stuff. I would get them rolling, and then it was almost like assembly line method or something. So I'd end up with a whole bunch. And then sometimes what happens, more so now, because I'm working a little bigger, a bigger composition won't work out, so I cut it up and make several smaller pieces. So these actually, in relation to what I was just saying, these two pieces were part of like a 15 by 20 piece, and I had this one, and I think this one underneath, and there was another one up top. I don't know if you can picture them, but they were on like a 15 by 20, like that other one I showed you, and kind of a standard size I use, and it just wasn't working, so I cut up the piece, and then I had 3 pieces. I've mentioned this character Balsam Adhesives a lot, and he is sort of, I guess he's a character. He's not like, it's different than comics, I guess, because it's more static. Like I've done comics I haven't been doing comics lately, but I've done comics for a long time. And so you always have to have a character. So I guess this way of working still really carries over from comics in that there's text and cartoony figures. So it's sort of a continuation of that, but it's very vague. I guess there's no real story, but things will sort of be touched on, but not necessarily explained. It's sort of implying maybe a bigger story, especially when things are repeated, I guess. Like Balsam Adhesives not here is sort of referring to this character, Balsam Adhesives, who's in that piece over there. It says Balsam Adhesives on the bottom. So it's this guy who always has this waffle cone hat, but he's appeared in a few things. When I was working on this, I really liked this guy, and I liked this guy, so I repeated them in another drawing, or in a drawing actually, as opposed to one of these. So that's so he was borrowed from that last drawing, and so is this, and there might have been others too. But so things get repeated. It's kind of about repeating shapes and characters and shapes, but they don't have maybe as a distinct identity as in the comics. These characters, they're sort of always changing, because in a comic you have to keep it all the same, because people have to sort of follow it. Even though my comics are pretty crazy, you sort of have to make it a narrative where you have to follow the character. But here, and also in comics, things have to be much simpler. A character has to be, like my comics are pretty detailed, but the characters have to be relatively simple so I can redraw them and they can sort of move. Whereas here they're more static, so then they end up going a little crazy with the detail. So and then I also don't have to keep them the same. So if I repeat a character, it can change. If I spell something, I should maybe try and spell it right, just because I was sort of doing it as a joke to make things kind of funny, but then I sort of ended up maybe not nauseating myself, but it's starting to feel a little gimmicky. Like this is called Belly Watt Leaflet, this drawing, and some friends of mine were calling me Belly Boy. That was their nickname. It was just joking around. They call me Belly Boy. They have nicknames for each other, and I would always drink hot water, so they would call it Belly Watt. Like so, if you're drinking hot water, just plain hot water, which I enjoy when I'm working, they would kind of joke with me. Oh, you're having a pot of Belly Watt. So Belly Boy, Belly Watt, and then on this drawing, I actually tried to not put as much text in it. I tried to refrain, but then I ended up putting Belly Watt Leaflet along the top. So this is called Belly Watt Leaflet. So in a way, it's I don't know how to explain it, but like an advertisement for Belly Watt, but it's not. It has nothing to do with hot water, really, other than drinking hot water when I made it. But anyway, it says, see also shoe slog on it. So I'm sort of, the audience won't necessarily pick up on this, but I'm sort of saying that character is from the piece Shoe Slog. So there's all these make connections, which I might understand, but the audience, I don't know, it's kind of overwhelming work, so they might not necessarily pick up on this stuff. I mean, I've worked a long time in a very loose community of people that sort of draw together or share jokes or whatever. So that all feeds into it. Like, for example, I've worked a long time with my friend Peter Thompson, and we sort of encourage stealing from each other in a way. So like I'll do something, and then he'll take it and use it as a joke in his work. So with the repetition, it sort of builds on itself. And I'm doing that within my own work too. But it's sort of, sometimes he'll pick up on some element in my work and take it, and then he'll do something with it that I think's funny. So then I'll sort of take it back and try and do something with it. But we haven't been working together. I haven't been collaborating as much as I used to, but in some ways, I'm doing that now within my own work. In that these scraps and things, I'm sort of using existing things and then reworking them, and it's sort of a similar. It's almost like I've sort of learned how to collaborate with myself or interfere, and collage allows me to do that a great deal. Like I'm always trying to interrupt something. Like, so I might I might be saying something, or there might be some text or an image, and then I'm trying to like throw a wrench into it or interrupt myself the way people sort of interrupt each other when they're collaborating. I think it makes things more interesting. When giant fry cooks walked the earth once again, luckily they didn't have their 9-inch nails cassette tapes with them, because I was a dishwasher in this kitchen, and the cooks used to listen to 9-inch nails, and sometimes I would bring in music and they wouldn't like it, and they would shut it off and stuff. So I was just trying to make fun of that idea. And and there's a tombstone that says, "I told you I was sick." Spike Milligan's tombstone. Anyway, I heard about it on the radio. They were talking about he died, and they're talking about his tombstone. So I heard it on the radio, and then "I'm so lazy it's crazy." That's a quote from Birdie Bye. So he's a friend. So I just stole it. He would say, "I'm so lazy it's crazy." So I just stole it and put it in there.